There is a line in A Course in Miracles that has the power to shatter centuries of misunderstanding. It says, "Your brother is the mirror in which you see the reflection of yourself, as long as perception lasts." It sounds poetic, but its meaning is revolutionary. It tells us that every person we meet, every situation that irritates or inspires us, is not happening to us. It's happening within us. The faces around you are mirrors held up by your own mind, reflecting what you still believe about yourself. And as long as you hold a perception of separation, the mirrors keep appearing. But the moment you release judgment, the mirror clears. The reflection disappears. What if every conflict was never about another person? What if it was only about the thoughts you still protect in secret? That's the invitation of this teaching, to stop trying to fix the images and start healing the mind that projects them. Most people live their lives like dream characters trapped in someone else's story. They blame, they defend, they chase happiness outside themselves. But Jesus says something startling. The lesson is never about the world. The classroom is only the mind. The people you meet, the jobs you hate, the family that tests your patience, these are not your problems. They are mirrors reflecting the unhealed corners of your mind. And here's the twist. The moment you recognize this, you regain your power. Because then, instead of fighting shadows, you start cleaning the mirror. Imagine someone who irritates you, a friend, a colleague, a stranger. The ego's instinct is to justify your discomfort. They're arrogant, they're lazy, they're wrong. But the Course says, you never hate your brother for his sins, but only for your own. What you condemn in another is the part of yourself you haven't yet forgiven. The universe, in its mercy, keeps bringing those reflections until you look gently at them and say, "This too is mine, and I choose to let it go." Forgiveness, in this light, is not moral superiority. It is accurate perception. To forgive is to remember that the other was never separate, that both the offender and the offended are dream figures in the same sleeping mind. And what of the world we see? The Course calls it a perceptual hallucination. It insists there is no world apart from what you think. Every mountain, every city, every body is an image made of thought. You may call it physical, but beneath the microscope of awareness it dissolves into pure mind stuff, ideas, emotions, interpretations. The mind dreams a world and forgets it is dreaming. That's why Jesus says, change your mind about your mind. The goal is not to improve the dream, but to wake up from it. He tells us that all lessons are mental lessons, not interpersonal, not circumstantial, but internal. The mind learned false beliefs, and now it must unlearn them. This is the work, to stop confusing the screen with the projector. Every situation is a film playing on the wall of consciousness, and the true correction happens in the projector room, in your thoughts. People often say, all I have to do is change my mind. But few understand what that truly means. It is not an intellectual adjustment. It is a total reversal of perception, a willingness to see everything as coming from the inside out. To the ego, that feels unbearable because the ego survives through blame. It feeds on the illusion that guilt lies elsewhere. The moment you stop projecting guilt, the ego starves. That's why it fights back with fear, telling you that you'll lose control, that others will walk over you, that forgiveness is weakness. But Jesus smiles and says, it is with your thoughts alone that we must work. Only the thoughts need healing. The world is already neutral. Consider this. Sickness, too, is not physical. The Course calls it a defense against the truth. All illness is mental illness, it says, not as denial but as liberation. Because if sickness begins in thought, it can end there. When the mind releases its belief in separation, the body naturally aligns. What you call healing is simply the absence of conflict. But how do we practice this? The first step is radical self-honesty. When you are upset, stop asking who caused this, and ask instead, what in me still believes this story? When someone triggers you, say silently, "This is my lesson. Thank you for showing me what I still need to forgive." The world becomes your teacher, and every encounter becomes sacred. That's what Jesus means when he says, "When you meet anyone, remember it is a holy encounter." As you see him, you will see yourself. As you treat him, you will treat yourself. There are no private thoughts, and there are no private relationships. Each one is an altar where you either worship separation or remember unity. Think about that the next time you want to correct someone. The urge to fix another is the ego's last disguise. The real correction happens when you drop your need to be right, and the other automatically shifts. Because you stopped projecting the error, it dissolves. In truth, the Holy Spirit does all the healing. Our only task is to stop resisting. Forgiveness is the invitation for divine reinterpretation. It's saying, "I no longer trust my own perception. Show me what this means through your eyes." And the moment you do, peace enters not as emotion, but as recognition. Nowhere is this more tested than in relationships. The ego turns them into battlegrounds for control, a system of trade masked as love. You meet my needs, I'll meet yours. But true relationship, Jesus says, is the temple of the Holy Spirit. It's not built on roles. It's built on transparency. When two minds join in purpose, they hear the same guidance at the same time. The Holy Spirit arranges everything: who speaks, who listens, when to stay, when to go. Equality replaces bargaining. Joy replaces guilt. And when an agreement no longer serves, it simply ends without bitterness. Because the goal was never to keep the form. The goal was to heal the mind. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to drop another layer of defense. When you stop demanding that people behave a certain way, you discover a strange freedom, the freedom to love without condition. That's the Christ mind beginning to dawn. As the ego dissolves, something miraculous happens. You stop running from people. You start running toward them. The world, once a field of threats, becomes a field of holy encounters. Even a stranger at your door becomes a messenger from God. One teacher told a story. When missionaries knocked on his door, his family hid, but he opened it wide. He offered them water, talked about Jesus, and found joy in their sincerity. He wasn't defending beliefs. He was joining in love. That's what it means to live without an ego, to meet every form of faith and see only the devotion behind it. You begin to realize that every problem, sickness, betrayal, loss, is only a call to return to alignment. The Course says that problems come not to punish you, but to knock you back on track, like a divine correction. The world then becomes not an obstacle, but a feedback system pointing you back to peace. Even trauma, the deepest shadows of the psyche, are not proof of separation. They are opportunities for reinterpretation. The Holy Spirit never asks you to relive pain, only to look at it without fear. Once light touches the memory, it dissolves. Healing, then, is not erasing the past. It is seeing that it never truly happened. This is the meaning of resurrection. The mind rises from identification with the body and remembers itself as eternal spirit. That's why Jesus repeats, "You are not a body, you are free." Bodies feel pleasure and pain. Spirit feels only peace. To the ego, that sounds boring. But when you taste it, you realize it's the only real joy that exists. The ego's entire strategy is built on the false promise of pleasure. It tells you, seek love, seek power, seek approval. But hidden behind every pleasure it offers is pain, because both reinforce the same lie, that you are a body. The Course states it bluntly. It is impossible to seek for pleasure without finding pain. They are two sides of the same error. Why? Because both depend on the belief that you can get something from another. God only gives and never takes, but the ego gets. It wants to own, to possess, to complete itself through others. That is the origin of guilt. And sexuality, more than anything else, exposes that confusion between giving and getting. But the Holy Spirit doesn't shame desire, it reinterprets it. It uses every attraction, every emotion, every urge as a classroom for remembering true giving. Under the ego, sexuality is a transaction. Under the Spirit, it becomes a symbol of union, not of bodies, but of minds. In that light, even the body's impulses are purified, transformed from vehicles of guilt into channels of communication. That's the genius of divine pedagogy. Nothing is rejected, everything is repurposed. The same energy that fuels craving can fuel awakening. The same desire that once sought pleasure can now seek God. And then comes the great reversal. The Course says, all real pleasure comes from doing God's will. When your will and God's are one, conflict ends. Joy becomes constant, not as excitement, but as luminous calm. You stop oscillating between highs and lows. The pendulum rests at the center. This is the curriculum of joy. The Holy Spirit's entire plan is to lead the mind back to peace through happiness, not sacrifice. The only cost of awakening is the illusion of suffering. As awareness stabilizes, the lines between inside and outside vanish. You no longer feel like a fragment looking at a world. You are the field itself, the vast, radiant consciousness in which all appearances come and go. You see that forgiveness was never about others. It was about remembering that there are no others. That is the end of the ego, not a dramatic death, but a quiet fading. A whisper of recognition replaces centuries of striving. You look at the world and smile gently, knowing it was never your enemy. It was your mirror. And now the mirror dissolves and only light remains. This is the simple truth. You are dreaming and you can wake up. You are not what you perceive. You are what perceives. The Holy Spirit waits at the edge of every thought, ready to reinterpret it into love. The moment you let go of your need to be right, you join the mind of Christ. And in that joining, you remember, you were never apart. That is salvation, not escape from the world, but the end of the belief that there was a world to escape. So when you close your eyes tonight, don't ask the universe for things. Ask to see differently. Say, Holy Spirit, dissolve the images I made. Let me see through the eyes of peace. And then listen, because behind the silence, something eternal is whispering your true name. It says, you are as God created you, pure, innocent, unchanged. The dream is ending. The light is remembering itself through you. And in that remembrance, the ego disappears, not destroyed, but simply unrealized. This is the great dissolving, not a battle, but a dawn. There is no world apart from what you think. There is only mind. And mind, when healed, sees only love.